The catchphrase fake news has influenced the way how we think about the media in recent years. But I would like to talk about the real news. How do you feel hearing that journalists are blown up, shot dead, or raped before being killed? And this happens not in some distant war zone, but right here in a peacetime Europe. It happened in Malta. It happened in Slovakia. It happened in Bulgaria just last month. Journalists are executed because their job of telling the truth is getting into the way of somebody wanting to hide the facts, to steal from people, and to tell lies. I am lucky enough to live in a country where fights against journalists take place in courtrooms. It took our team 5 long years to fight back and win 4 civil cases that are brought against IR magazine by very influential opponents. Once even our assets were frozen by court for several months. But at least we can feel free and safe to go to work every day. But still, there are other dangers mounting, because journalists get harshly attacked by elected officials. Do you agree with President Trump, who is calling journalists enemies of the people? Are you following how independent journalism is assaulted by the state in Poland and in Hungary? It all reminds me how fragile our democracies could become. Indeed, we have walked this path before. Let me tell you how we, Latvians, once lost our country. We stuck to lies until it was too late. It happened in 1940, around a year after Hitler and Stalin secretly divided up Europe between them and started Second World War. This is a front page of Jaunākās ziņas, the most influential newspaper at the time. The June 18th, 1940, the very next day when Soviet tanks rolled in and started a 50-year-long occupation. Sadly, you will not find a word occupation on this front page. The newspaper quotes our authoritarian leader Kārlis Ulmanis as saying that Soviet troops are actually being welcomed by the government, and he tells every citizen to hold such a friendly attitude. Here is some direct quote from Ulmanis, where he says that these events, these disturbances, are just a transitory phenomenon that we will overcome in few days' time. Seriously? In 4 weeks, Ulmanis himself was deported to Soviet Union, never to return. In 8 weeks, Jaunākās ziņas was closed down forever. Hundreds of thousands of people were arrested, sent to Siberia, killed, or forced to flee the country. It took 2,647 weeks before Latvia regained its independence again in 1990. Well, you may wonder, why am I so emotional about some distant past? But I really am afraid that it can happen again if we don't take these lessons seriously. So, why did the most influential newspaper at the time not report the tragic fact of occupation? Because already for years, it was accustomed to special kind of lies, state propaganda. Because back in 30s, we Latvians, as a nation, agreed to dissolve parliament, to kill the competition of ideas, and we chose propaganda over truth. And it made Latvia weak while pretending to be stronger. Did you know that during the last year of independence, 24%, yes, 1/4, of all national budget went to defense? But when enemy came, we gave up without fight. Because arms can only be fired by people who know they are at war and who are willing to fight. You just stumble if you are in a fog of lies. Now, fast forward 50 years to the time when Soviet Union fell to pieces. Here in Latvia, the spirit of freedom was brought by very massive atmoda or awakening movement. And there were days when aggression from Soviet army was again imminent. But very important things had changed. We had no weapons then, but we had the resolve to break free. And media were escaping Soviet censorship and committed to tell the facts. And people really had a special bond with the media. They went to demonstrations carrying small radio sets by ear just to follow the news. And we even built barricades to defend our public broadcaster. So we proved that we value truth, and some of us even risked lives to protect it. But are we safe now? And what price are we ready to pay for the truth now? I believe that because of ignorance and complacency, we are in a greater danger than we think we are. And I see two important factors that shape our information space and that make truth-telling quite challenging. First, trust in the Kremlin. Second, decreasing resources for the journalist. So, the first problem. As a nation, we trust the Kremlin to provide information for a big part of our society. Imagine Russia uses tons of money, uses hackers and trolls to influence public opinion in America or in Europe, but here in Latvia there's no need for that, because big part of our ethnic minorities get infused by Kremlin worldview just by sitting on the couch in front of their TV sets. Every month, 75% of our ethnic minorities watch channel PBK, which basically rebroadcasts Kremlin program. And most dangerously, a lot of people believe that this is some trusted public broadcasting. We pay very high price for this, because deep split in opinions is entrenched in our society. For example, recent poll shows that almost 60% of Latvians believe that NATO is a good thing, but only 16% of people from ethnic minorities agree. Believe it or not, twice as many non-Latvians think that Putin is doing better job at fighting corruption and upholding human rights than the Latvian government. Well, this is not an even playing field. Independent media cannot compete with generously financed, state-controlled media with political agenda. We need to change it. And also, we need to use our education system to really put whole our nation on the same page. And it can be done within a span of one generation. It has worked before. Do you recognize this acronym? Well, in Soviet times, everybody knew that this stands for Central Committee of the one and only Communist Party. But some years ago, IR magazine made a survey of high school students. We wanted to find out what they know about the Soviet era. And guess what? Majority didn't recognize this Soviet symbol, but believed that this stands for Calvin Klein. So even very deep scars can be healed. Now, the second problem. We are so used to getting our news for free that we just forget to ask who is actually paying for this. The business model of the media that heavily depended on advertising money is crumbling, and there is no easy way to replace it. In Latvia, 2009 was a point of no return. The media industry lost almost half of its ad income and never got it back. Well, imagine losing half of your blood. Can you survive? Media are struggling. And of course, we see it all around the world. Two big shifts in global ad market has happened just in last 2 decades. In mid-90s, TV took over the leading role from the newspapers, but last year, the internet overtook TV. Of course, technological change is very welcomed, but we need to understand that this recent change is very different. For the first time, the ad money is taken out of the hands of content creators. Just two big monopolies, Google and Facebook, are getting 60% of all digital ad money. It means that media globally are losing resources. As a result, we get less good journalism. Most often, what we get instead are PR messages passed on as news. For example, in recent decades, the United States has lost 1/3 of all its journalists, while the number of PR specialists has doubled. The number of entries for the most prestigious Pulitzer Prize for investigative journalism has decreased by 30%. And here in Latvia, we have practically lost daily newspapers as a media segment, and most importantly, as a place where in-depth journalism is done. Back in 2009, I was editor-in-chief of Dienas Mēdī, the leading publishing house in the Baltics. Then our local oligarchs bought it and effectively killed it. Since then, the newspaper Diena has lost around 70% of its readers. And that didn't happen just because of market shift. It is a vicious fight for power at the expense of the public good. Look at Estonia. The most popular daily Postimees there has 3 times bigger readership than that of the most popular Latvian daily. Well, I know how this might look. Some depressed representative from dying industry tells you how great things used to be. But actually, I am not depressed at all. And it is not about journalists whining for some pay rise. It is about the fundamental fact that independent journalism is an expensive product. It used to be subsidized by ad money, but these days are over. If the consumers are not willing to share the cost of independent information, they are going to get someone's agenda instead. It is that simple. I think it's really high time for the media consumers to take seriously the saying, you get what you pay for. If Russia is paying for our news, we get Kremlin lies. If oligarchs are paying for our newspapers, we get their agenda. If you pay 0, you get 0. As citizens, we entrust billions of tax money every year to state officials. We need an adequate alarm system just to keep an eye on how this money is spent. And media serve as such public watchdogs. But if there are fewer investigative journalists in Latvia than government ministers, we are just heading in the wrong direction. If we are not willing to pay for the journalism, we are going to pay much more for not having it. And luckily, people all around the world start to understand and are ready to contribute. Recent report indicates that 30% of Norwegians have paid for online news last year. Of course, they are champions. But around 10% of people in other countries are also paying. And this brings me to the most important question I would like each of you to ask yourself. What price are you paying for the truth? Are you contributing to existence of quality journalism in Latvia through subscription? Are you donating to some independent media organizations? Are you actually consuming quality journalism and at least paying attention? Too often, we take important freedoms for granted. But freedom of the speech and freedom of the press is like a muscle. We need to exercise them to keep them alive and strong. And flexing this muscle can't be responsibility of journalists alone. It is important muscle in our collective body, so we can exercise it only together. As an editor of independent magazine, I really rely on the support of our readers every single day. And this is not just kind emails. It is readers' money that create most of our magazine's income. So our financial viability and the editorial independence really is provided by our readers. And I just imagine how much stronger independent journalism could be if more and more people would join in supporting it in every possible way. We can make it happen together. Thank you.